The Nelson Audio Library presents Love Hunger by Doctors Frank Minirth, Paul Meyer, Robert Hemfelt, and Sharon Sneed. Listen to these questions. Do you lose weight only to gain it right back? Do you eat to comfort yourself? Do you lie about how much you've eaten? Do you fear your eating is out of control? If you answered yes, you could be a victim of a codependent relationship with food. In this book, the doctors of the Minirth Meyer Clinic offer a 10-stage recovery program that can free you from your food addiction and lead you to a new healthy way of life for your body, mind, and soul. And now, Love Hunger.
Love Hunger, Part 1, Understanding the Problem. What is compulsive eating? Our definition of a compulsive overeater is a person who is eating to satisfy profound spiritual and emotional hungers of which they may or may not be aware. The issue to be dealt with is not how much the person eats or even how much the person weighs, but rather his or her reasons for eating. A compulsive eater's addiction to food is a strong emotional reliance on something on the outside to make one feel good on the inside. This is called codependency. Unless the causes of this behavior are identified, the person will never be free from an addictive relationship with food. If you're trying to decide whether or not you're a compulsive eater, ask yourself the following questions. Do you eat when you're angry? Do you eat to comfort yourself in times of crisis and tension? Do you eat to stave off boredom? Do you lie to yourself and others about how much you have eaten or when you ate? Do you hide food away for yourself? Are you embarrassed about your physical appearance? Are you 20% or more over your medically recommended weight? Have significant people in your life expressed concern about your eating patterns? Has your weight fluctuated by more than 10 pounds in the past 6 months? Do you fear your eating is out of control? If you found yourself answering yes to several of these questions, you are a compulsive overeater. Compulsive overeating is just one type of eating disorder. 2 other types are anorexia and bulimia. Anorexia is chronic self-starvation to more than 20% below the ideal body weight. Anorexia is an eater's attempt to control something in his or her environment, a rigid authoritarian father, for example, by controlling food. Bulimia is compulsive overeating to fill love hunger, then purging the food out in an attempt to purge out guilt pain. Although the emotional dynamics of all 3 eating disorders and the principles of recovery are similar, this presentation is focused on the compulsive overeater, and for the sake of simplicity, most of our references will be directed to this disorder. Anorexics and bulimics, however, share many emotional dynamics with compulsive overeaters, and we invite all who suffer from any eating disorder to walk our pathways to recovery. If you, like a majority of Americans, have repeatedly gone on diets and fallen off, and understanding that this is not a single problem that just requires a little more willpower is a key to understanding why so many past attempts to conquer the problem have failed, and why the multifaceted approach of the Minirth Meyer Clinic can succeed. Ralph, a successful patient of this program, offers these encouraging, valuable words. I learned that I was eating to fill a vacuum the doctors call love hunger, created by my messed-up childhood. I learned how the pain of that love hunger caused low self-esteem that got me on the addiction cycle. And I learned all the pathways I have to walk to reach the full recovery I've committed to. Getting help from other people is scary, but it's also fun and rewarding. And remember, just keep telling yourself you're worth it. Every day, if you really believe you deserve to be healthy and happy, then you'll make it, one day at a time. Overeaters need to understand the dynamics that cause their eating compulsion before they can begin to change this addiction. Let's look at 12 common reasons for compulsive overeating so that you can identify the specific factors that are influencing you. 1. Overeaters may respond compulsively to cultural pressures. Never before in history have so much time, money, and energy gone into urging people to eat, and yet at the same time demanding that they be slim. The next time you watch television, notice what you're being bombarded with. Our culture bombards us simultaneously with messages that say, eat, 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 and be thin, be thin, be thin. The increasing amount of fast food and food being eaten outside of the home has undoubtedly turned a lot of people who were not compulsive eaters into obsessives because the food is so readily accessible. This cultural phenomenon has also produced many secret eaters, especially people who eat in their cars. Our culture also promotes magical thinking with regard to diet programs. The list of things that don't work seems endless. Fad diets don't work. Starvation doesn't work. Wearing special clothing to melt off calories doesn't work. Reducing machines alone don't work. Laxatives don't work. 2. Overeaters may subconsciously desire added pounds to protect themselves from love and intimacy. Many compulsive overeaters make an effort to deny, repress, or obscure sexuality. An extension of using food as a denial of sexuality is using food for intimacy avoidance. This works in 2 ways. First of all, if our obsession with food demands emotional energy, either by our overeating or by our trying to fight a compulsion to eat, the amount of energy available to give to a relationship is limited. Secondly, the overeater can become so obese that he isn't interested in sex, and others are not tempted to initiate sexual intimacy. Roller coaster eaters, those who are forever losing and gaining 20 or 30 pounds, worry before every meal. What should I eat? What shouldn't I eat? If they are cautious about what they eat or overeat, they may be obsessed with guilt. This endless obsession with food starts to crowd out other life issues, including intimacy with other people, which may, in fact, be the eater's subconscious goal. 3. Overeaters may use food to satisfy their need for immediate gratification. We're all born self-centered, but if children aren't adequately nurtured and disciplined and aren't given good role models, they'll continue to want instant gratification. So whenever they want food, they eat. They indulge themselves and become overweight. This neediness often leads to an exaggerated sense of competition. The instinct for food is so basic that people will subconsciously compete for food by taking larger portions than they want. The person who doesn't know how to provide self-gratification by building relationships or developing creative hobbies will repeatedly turn to the cookie jar for gratification. We have found this cause of overeating to be particularly difficult to detect because people often cover narcissistic neediness with a veneer of unselfishness or altruism. 4. Overeaters may use food as a tranquilizer. When these people have anxiety, they eat. Their blood sugar level rises and they feel relaxed. There are millions of nerves coming from all the other parts of the brain to and from the hypothalamus gland, which controls the pituitary gland. And when some people get nervous, their satiety center says, "You're hungry." In reality, they may not actually be hungry, but if they eat and their blood sugar level gets higher, they relax. Of course, they then feel guilty about overeating, and the cycle starts all over again. 5. Overeaters may concentrate on their desire for food to avoid facing problems. Our mind often employs defense mechanisms as a means of protecting us from intense chronic emotional pain. One of the most powerful defense mechanisms is diversion or distraction. An eating disorder gradually consumes greater and greater portions of one's mental and emotional energy. The compulsive overeater may be flooded with both food fantasies about what will be eaten and remorse feelings about what has already been eaten. This preoccupation with food, weight, size, image, and hunger functions like an emotional tumor. It crowds out healthy personality energy, which should be directed toward important life tasks, such as resolving intimacy conflicts with a mate or carving out meaningful vocational identity. 6. Overeaters may eat to punish themselves or others. All eating disorders are activities of self-destruction and eventual slow suicide. Often, this self-punishment is an indirect expression of anger. A number of our patients are really angry at themselves for something they have done. When they're overweight, they can hate themselves for the weight, which may be less painful than getting in touch with their anger toward themselves because of their mistake. Many compulsive overeaters carry a large burden of false guilt and unnecessary shame, perhaps about childhood situations over which the person had no control. The guilt sufferer feels, if I just stay fat and unhappy the next 10 years, then magically I'll have paid the guilt debt. Other people want to punish their mates by blaming each other. 7. Overeaters may eat to relieve depression or stress. Chronic obesity may be an indirect and dysfunctional means of communicating to a mate feelings of hostility about how needs are not being met in the relationship. In the history of the clinic, we have treated thousands of people for depression on an outpatient and inpatient basis. The majority of those people suffer from repressed anger that has been turned inward. This buried anger may be a response to old pain in the family of origin and/or the contemporary pain of a highly conflicted adult relationship. These resentments may also arise from the self-imposition of perfectionistic performance standards. Chronic resentments lead to depression, which eventually manifests as a physical problem. A depletion of brain chemicals like serotonin and norepinephrine caused by holding a resentment can further cause people to gain weight due to the physical and psychomotor inactivity which often accompanies depression. Depression can also trigger an opposite response because they become inactive while continuing to eat at their former levels. Many people who develop such a neurochemical depletion will lose their appetites, and some may even develop anorexia. The underlying anger associated with depression may surface as compulsive chewing, which may reflect repressed hostility from childhood or high levels of current stress. The compulsive chewers not only gain weight, but also they frequently develop temporomandibular joint syndrome, TMJ, a joint disease of the jaw. These people repress anger because anger is not an acceptable emotion for nice people. They are looking for an oral sublimation of their hostility. Then they feel guilty and angry at themselves for overeating, and the cycle starts again. 8. Overeaters may eat to rebel against themselves or others. People can become so tired and frustrated with trying to live up to a perfect body image or follow the rules or follow a diet that they may use overeating as a radical push against this pressure. People may binge to get revenge on parents. Many parents will say, "Be sure to eat, clean up your plate," or the exact opposite, "Stay a good weight, don't make a pig of yourself." Teenagers especially like to rebel and use eating as a way to counter their parents' demands. 9. Overeaters may eat to express their need to control their circumstances. All addictions are fundamentally control addictions. For the codependent personality, control, or the lack of it, is central to every aspect of life. Obviously, control is a major issue, especially to the perfectionist. Most perfectionists are oldest children who grew up in a home where they were overly controlled. As a child grows older, there are only a few battlegrounds where they can practice their control. Money is one of them. It's not unusual for a binge eater to become a binge spender or a compulsive shopper. Or frequently, food becomes the battleground where the perfectionistic person seeks to be the boss over something. Believing you can solve the control addiction with just a little more self-control is self-defeating. and often leads to renewed binge eating each time this faulty approach fails. 10. Overeaters may have a faulty perception of their body image. A faulty perception of body image can make a person overeat or undereat compulsively. None of us sees the self with entire accuracy, but eating disordered persons really have no idea how they look. The more serious an eating addiction is, the less accurately a person sees himself or herself in either a physical or emotional mirror. 11. Overeaters may have emotional feelings about food which were developed at their parents' dinner table. It is important to develop an understanding about table manners during meal times. If family members abuse each other at the table, if they overeat, use food as a medication, or use food excessively to celebrate, then a family's attitude toward food may have contributed to a person's eating disorder. The dinner table that acts as a battleground may cause a child to dig into the food for emotional as well as physical sustenance. Obsessive parents who insist on perfectly clean plates often contribute to an adult's food compulsivity. Most true food addicts will eat for solace when they are feeling bad and eat to celebrate. Some people overeat to please their parents. They feel that eating abundant portions will reinforce to mom that she is a good nurturer. 12. Overeaters use food as a nurturer to satisfy their love hunger. If your problem is rooted in a multi-generational dysfunction, then you may be walking around with a vacuum in your heart, which is illustrated by our empty heart, empty stomach model. Children who are deprived of a heart-filling childhood will walk around with empty hearts by the time they reach late childhood or adolescence. People with heart hunger will stuff their stomachs, either constantly or periodically, in an attempt to fill their hearts, but no matter what they put into or force out of their stomachs, none of it touches the heart. In fact, the more effort and energy they direct toward their stomachs, the less emotional and psychic energy they can invest in those things that could legitimately fill their hearts. So if either of two things has happened to you, if you have come from a dysfunctional family, you may have entered adulthood with an empty heart. Or if you came from a normal family, but in adulthood encountered enormous setbacks, you may now have an emotional deficit. This deficit can even be caused by the exhaustion and constant giving required by good things in your life. Nurturing an active, growing family, career success that demands more and more of you, volunteer work that swells to take so much of your energy that you have no time left to recharge your own batteries. Consider the example of empty heart, empty stomach when you feel a desire to overeat, and then ask yourself, is my stomach hungry or is my heart hungry? Since your relationship with food has more to do with people relationships, both past and present, than with calories, protein, or other food issues, you will want to survey all of your relationships. The first area of your relationships to survey is your family of origin, the family you grew up in, whether your biological parents raised you or you were adopted, either legally or informally. Recall what it was like growing up. What was the emotional atmosphere in your family? There are 3 types of abuse you need to understand in order to evaluate whether or not your family of origin was dysfunctional. Active abuse is the easiest to identify because it is violent and often manifests in conspicuous ways. Active abuse includes beatings, sexual violation, verbal or emotional violence, or rigid over-control. Passive abuse, the second type, is harder to identify because it consists of acts of omission, certain qualities that were missing in the family, rather than acts of commission. The tyranny of what we call the isms in a home creates a third type of abusive situation, which may have elements of both active and passive abuse. The isms we refer to include alcoholism, rageaholism, workaholism, perfectionism. Any all-consuming behavior of the parents that denied the children time, attention, and affection, or that led to beatings or over-control. A second major area of relationship inventory involves your history of interpersonal relationships with the opposite sex. Being able to see repetitious patterns in your relationships with the opposite sex is one of the most valuable discoveries you can make. One of the most devastating patterns is codependency, in which one seeks to gain identity and worth through the approval of a partner. Early dating experiences are an attempt to transplant intimacy from the family of origin to a larger circle, and one may subconsciously choose situations similar to those in the home. List all the names that come to mind as you think back through these relationships, from adolescence through young adulthood up to the present. Then, in journal form, sketch out what you remember about each particular relationship. What painful or non-working, dysfunctional patterns repeat over and over? A third area of inventory involves a close look at your current family relationships. How do you feel about walking through the door of your house? Love hunger can be used to build a warm, secure marriage, and that's good. Too often, however, we see cases in which it has led to over-bonding with a parent or a child, or something outside the marriage relationship, or even something non-human, like food. Is your current family a safe place where your emotional needs are adequately met? In any family, the tightest love bond needs to be between spouses. When spouses are not truly married to each other, there will be dysfunction. This is an especially important area for compulsive overeaters because there is always some degree to which the food-obsessive person is married to food. Besides looking at your relationships with those living in your home, look at your friendships. A great many compulsive eaters have allowed food to consume their lives so fully that they have no room for normal friendships. A fourth dimension of the relationship inventory is an examination of your relationships with authority figures. Some of this will be repetitious of the first point surveyed, but this time think of these people as authority figures rather than in parental, nurturing roles. To evaluate the authority in your home, you need to understand that authority can be abused in two ways. Under control by parents who ignore a child is as abusive as over control from tyrannical parents. We offer our patients 4 guidelines to determine whether or not they received abusive discipline. 1. Was there any tissue damage? Were you spanked hard enough to leave bruises or to raise welts? 2. Did the discipline come out of a power struggle arising from the parent's insecurity? 3. Was there any humiliation involved in the punishment? Forcing a child to pull down his pants to receive a spanking in a shopping mall is abusive. 4. Was the punishment disproportionate? An anorexic patient told us the punishment never fit the crime. Once I was grounded for 2 weeks for refusing to eat the crust of a piece of cream pie. As a fifth component of the relationship inventory, take a look at your relationship with yourself. How do you view yourself? This part of the survey is important because elements of low self-esteem will begin to show up. The building block is, I've got to have a good relationship with myself before I can have a good relationship with other people, and I've got to have a good relationship with people before I can have a good relationship with food. We've got to identify the food problems and then go down through all the layers to get to the core issues. To do this, first take a clean sheet of paper and complete this sentence as fully as you can. I don't like me because... An honest assessment of the answer will be helpful in validating areas where self-improvement is needed, and more importantly, it will show areas of unnecessary self-blame. Now, on another sheet of paper, write a letter of introduction for yourself, commending yourself to a new person you will be meeting. Generously list all of your positive qualities. This part of the survey is crucial to your recovery. A major goal of food recovery is to gradually embrace and affirm these positive aspects of who and what you are. This brings us to relationships with food. It is often important for patients to approach this part of the survey by beginning with a sixth element of the inventory, their earliest memories. Look for the progression of your eating addiction. Remember that your feelings about food form a relationship as real as any relationship with another person. Your relationship with food affects all your people relationships, including your relationship with yourself. Look for patterns while framing your eating history. What different roles and purposes has food served during various stages of your life? A seventh part of the inventory is your relationship with your own body. Again, go back in time and ask yourself, how did I see my body as a child? Then in adolescence and puberty, what did you hear about your body? Then in your college or post-high school years, what kind of messages did you get about whether or not you measured up physically? And most importantly, in marriage, ask yourself, do I feel my body is okay? Ask yourself, am I disembodied? Do you have a sense of being at war with your body? Only when peace is declared can the healing begin. Finally, an eighth and perhaps most significant aspect of the inventory is your relationship with God, with the one who is so central to many successful recovery programs for addictions. As you work through this spiritual survey, you may see many ways in which past disappointments in human relationships have tainted your emotional feelings toward the God of the universe. As you have seen, the causes of compulsive eating are intertwined and overlapping with all your relationships. Doing your relationship survey should have helped you to understand why you have a void inside you that you have been trying to fill with compulsive eating. Denial keeps the addiction cycle going. People identify their problem as food when it really might be relationship codependency or love hunger or depression. And in an inverted way, admitting to the food addiction can be its own form of denial, a denial of the deeper underlying problem. All addictions, including food dependency, function as an ensnaring, vicious circle or cycle. Consider the six-step downward spiral of an addiction. Step 1 on the cycle is love hunger itself. Love hunger is the trigger mechanism that sets off the addiction cycle. This most often begins in childhood. Anyone from a dysfunctional family is likely to enter adulthood with a significant vacuum of unmet emotional neediness. That vacuum is the unresolved love hunger. Step 2 is the emotional pain which results from chronic love hunger. We call this painful state of being low self-esteem, which frequently manifests in the symptoms of depression and anxiety. Step 3 is the repeated reaching to food as an anesthetic for the pain. Food is not only an anesthetic, but also the fuel that perpetuates the cycle with the pain of its consequences. The overeater turns to food to kill the pain, and at the same time uses food as a means of self-punishment to generate pain. This dual function of food can cause an addiction to continue like an endless feedback loop. Step 4 on the cycle involves the consequences or fallout from practicing the food addiction. Sports and physical recreation become uncomfortable, difficult, and finally impossible. Travel is also uncomfortable, if not impossible, to enjoy. Over and over, patients have reported job discrimination resulting from their obesity. Obese people also suffer interpersonal rejection in romantic relationships, in friendships, and even within the family. Although the food dependency is an effort to cope with pain, it actually generates significant new pain.
This concludes this side. Please fast forward the cassette to the end and turn the tape over for the continuation of the program.
The fifth stop on the addiction wheel involves a new encounter with shame and guilt. Remember that false guilt and unnecessary shame were legacies from the dysfunctional family of origin and major contributors to the exaggerated love hunger and low self-esteem. Now the ongoing practice of the food addictions adds new layers of guilt and shame to the original shame base. Shame about the eating disorder consequences, and shame about one's apparent inability to slow or stop the addiction juggernaut. The sixth and final point on the cycle is self-hatred. The accumulation of shame, broken promises to self and others, and rejection, real or imagined, which accompanies food addiction, brings one to a point of self-loathing. This self-hatred can be so corrosive that it is sometimes referred to as an emotional cancer. Our feelings consume us and turn against us. This self-hatred intensifies the love hunger, lowers self-esteem even further, and the food addiction is then sent spinning around the cycle in another effort to chase this escalating pain. If a person deals with only a single point on the cycle, the other points continue to build up until the pain is so great that they will have to dip back again into the addictive agent, again and again. Compulsive eating tends to be chronic and progressive. The most common pattern is that of the steady downward spiral. Any addiction has its triggers, substances or situations that cause an uncontrollable rush, demanding that the addict engage in the narcotic agent or act. For the food addict, sugar and chocolate are common trigger foods, although there can be situational triggers, such as family gatherings, especially around holiday time, parties, and award banquets, causing pressure to eat, drink, and celebrate, driving past fast food places, TV ads, and grocery shopping. Since the only lasting form of recovery from food addiction requires that all aspects of the addiction cycle be addressed comprehensively, let's begin a walk through the 10 pathways of recovery utilized in the Minirth-Meier approach to love hunger treatment. Part 2. 10 Pathways to Recovery. Path 1. Preparing to succeed. The first step to any successful journey is solid preparation, some of which you have done in the first part of this tape. Now we want you to focus specifically on preparing to diet. Be sure you have identified all your addictions, not just food addiction. Most people who behave compulsively are polyaddicted. It's very important to be certain you know exactly what you are dealing with. Now you must be willing to abstain from your addiction or addictions. Always, you must keep in mind that the emotional issues and the food issues are closely interwoven. For example, your addiction to over-controlling other people may be intimately connected with your food dependency, and there must be a willingness to address the relationship codependency simultaneously with the food recovery. Be sure you have broken through denial. Denial must be broken before healing can begin. One of the best ways to be absolutely certain that no vestiges of denial linger is to fully acknowledge your addiction in writing. Tell yourself exactly what you now understand about your addiction. Acknowledge the problem to God and others. Confessing to God is an important step in breaking out of denial. The final step is to confess our awareness of the full extent of our addictions to another trusted human being, such as a pastor, therapist, close friend, or recovery group sponsor. Be sure you have identified your trigger foods and situations. If you're not sure what your own triggers are, look back through your relationship survey to the section on your relationship with food. Your conscious mind may not know its own triggers, but your subconscious does. Be sure you have enlisted your family's support. One of the most common causes of diet failure is family sabotage. Use subtlety in preparing your family to cooperate with your new regimen. Change your family's habits gently, slowly, and quietly. Avoid blaming compulsive eating on others. Be sure you are dieting for the right motives. Be sure you are doing this for yourself, or you will subconsciously be angry at the person you are dieting for, and that suppressed anger will cause roller coaster eating. Be sure you have set reasonable goals. Find the point at which your weight is the healthiest and the easiest to maintain. Staying at this set point will be much more comfortable than trying to look like your favorite movie star or sports figure. In order to get an idea of the range around your set point, look back at your relationship survey of your body. What is your weight history? Now ask yourself, at what times in my life was I happiest? Another factor in setting realistic goals is to consider your percentage of body fat. Most doctors feel that 15 to 20% of a man's body weight should be fat, 20 to 27% for women. You also need to have realistic goals regarding how fast you will lose. Be sure you understand the medical risks of overweight. The motive to have a long, healthy life is an excellent reason to diet, and understanding the medical risks of overweight can clarify that motive for you. There are 8 medical complications of severe overweight: cardiovascular, cancer, lipid problems, type 2 diabetes, joint, tendon and back problems, pregnancy complications, surgical risks, and aging. Be sure you have your doctor's approval to diet. A diet is a lifestyle change, and any lifestyle change, even a healthy one, will put stress on the body. Therefore, it's important that your doctor give you a physical examination before you begin dieting. Be sure you understand why diets in the past haven't worked. Some of the popular diets and diet programs in the past have been unbalanced, unhealthy, or simply outrageous. Nothing before in the varied history of diets and dieting has offered the comprehensive, approaching the problem from all angles program that we present here. Be sure you truly want to be free. In order to achieve long-term mastery over your weight, you must want it enough to be willing to break the emotional and spiritual bonds that you may have befriended. When this is done, you will truly have gone on your last diet. The victory will be that you will be able to control your desire, physically or emotionally, to gorge, and you will know how to respond successfully when relapse threatens. Then you will be able to live in peace and freedom with your body and your appetite. Path 2. Eating for success. A healthy diet means a healthy you. If you feel better, then you're going to be more motivated in every area of your life. A healthy diet will increase your lifespan, but even more important than lengthening your life is raising the quality of your life. Dr. Sharon Sneed uses her 12 quick-hitting rules to losing and maintaining weight to focus on the way you'll need to eat to achieve your optimum body size. 1. Calories do count. Weight loss and weight gain comes down to an equation all revolving around calorie balance. If you eat larger portions of food, then you're going to have to put something else, like more exercise, on the other side to counterbalance that. In general, you should have at least 55% of your calories coming from carbohydrate, 30% from fat, and 15% from protein. If you choose to have a lower fat diet, then the extra calories should come from carbohydrates. 2. Fat is fattening. Adults need to have a cholesterol count below 1,200 milligrams per deciliter. You also need to know what level your good cholesterol is, your HDL cholesterol. Your HDL cholesterol ratio should be 4.0 or below. Remember, fat is fattening. It is the most concentrated source of calories you can consume. 3. Feast on fiber. The theory behind a high-fiber diet is that this fiber pushes the food through the digestive system faster, reducing the time for absorption of fat. And of course, there's the fact that fiber fills your stomach and gives you a greater feeling of satiety. For optimum health, your diet should contain 25 grams of crude fiber a day. 4. Control your appetite. Dr. Sneed claims that there are 8 hints to help you control hunger. 1. Moderate exercise helps reduce appetite. 2. A diet slightly higher in protein seems to help ease hunger pains because protein is digested more slowly. 3. Eat a high-fiber diet because it expands in your stomach and helps decrease hunger pains. 4. Decrease sugar. Sugars seem to increase hunger because they raise blood insulin levels, which cause a drop in blood glucose levels about 2 hours after the sugar intake. 5. Eat frequently to stabilize blood glucose levels. 6. Don't overeat. If your body becomes accustomed to overeating for even 1 or 2 meals, the habit will form. 7. Drink hot liquids. Hot liquids seem to be more satisfying than cold liquids. 8. Avoid alcohol and caffeine. Both alcohol and caffeine are appetite stimulants and should be avoided during weight loss. Rule 5. Control your portion size. One should not consume more than a cup of starch or of a lower-calorie vegetable at any one time, and certainly not more than 4 ounces of meat in one meal. All anyone needs is 1 plate of food. 6. Take supplements while losing weight. It is very difficult to get all of the nutrients your body requires when you are following a restricted diet. Choose a moderate vitamin-mineral supplement. 2 minerals that women need to be especially careful to have in adequate supply are calcium and iron. A woman's vitamin-mineral supplement should contain 10 to 18 milligrams of iron, but no more than that. 7. Be supermarket wise. If you have the wrong ingredients in your kitchen, it is going to be very, very difficult to eat right. Buy whole grains whenever possible, as they provide more fiber and usually more micronutrients. Fish that has not been fried and skinless chicken, prepared without frying, are usually the best choices. Choose meats that are named round, such as ground round, round steak, etc. Good choices also include sirloin and tenderloin. Adults need milk, especially adult women. Osteoporosis is a major killer of women in the United States because they're not getting enough calcium. The thing to avoid is the fat in milk. Cheese has undeservedly gained a reputation as a healthful food when it is, in fact, extremely high in saturated fat. Cheese is not a good choice and should be used very sparingly. Of the monounsaturated oils, olive oil is the best one for helping to lower cholesterol levels. But all of the oils have the same amount of calories and can be used interchangeably. Again, the focus is the amount. Use the least amount possible. Cooking sprays are very helpful here. Choose a dressing that is 25 calories per tablespoon or less, and use that light cholesterol-free mayonnaise. When in a restaurant, never choose anything but an au jus or a thin natural gravy. Choose produce that looks very fresh and has a lot of color. Get a good vegetable brush and scrub your vegetables as well as possible, and then keep the skins on. The main thing to watch out for in processed and packaged foods is too many additives. Avoid too many artificial ingredients and apply our rule of choosing only products with 30% or less fat. On a weight loss diet, there is no room in the caloric allotment for alcoholic beverages. Fruit juices, alcohol, tea, and coffee are not recommended due to their high sugar and caffeine levels. Instead, try herbal teas or decaffeinated drinks. Be sure you drink 6 to 8 large glasses of clear liquids a day. 8. Eat at home whenever possible. Restaurant food is generally more calorie concentrated than home-cooked food because high-calorie products are easy to work with, are satisfying, and make the food taste good. 9. Make wise choices when you eat out. Here are some hints for healthful restaurant ordering. Help to choose the restaurant. Make up your mind what you need before you go into the restaurant. Don't order extras such as alcoholic beverages, appetizers, or desserts. Order the same types of food you would have cooked at home. 10. Beat the roller coaster. If your weight has gone up and down like a roller coaster for your entire life, you need to rethink what you're doing. Commit now to changing your lifestyle to one that produces slow, consistent weight loss. 11. Control your cues. People receive many signals to eat that are entirely unconnected with nutritional needs. Items in your cupboard can give rise to a temptation to eat. Other temptations can arise from activities that encourage eating, such as watching television or reading. Make a rule that when you eat, you only eat. If you must continue preparing meals for others while trying to lose weight, do your meal preparations while your control isn't weakened by hunger and fatigue. 12. Salt is out, spice is in. You should be eating about 3 grams of sodium or less per day. A simple rule for detection is, if it tastes salty, it probably is salty. Spices are easy to use, and well-spiced food does not require salt. To lose weight and keep it off successfully, a regular exercise session of about 30 minutes a day is absolutely essential. There are many reasons for this. Exercise builds muscle or lean body mass. Exercise improves body toning and body strength during a time in which the body is deprived of food sources of energy. Exercise helps increase the body's metabolism. Aerobic exercise strengthens the heart and lung muscles, thereby decreasing blood pressure. Recent research indicates that aerobic exercise lowers body cholesterol, triglycerides, and glucose levels. Load-bearing exercise causes a decrease in calcium loss from bone mass. Consistent aerobic exercise increases your energy levels and gives you a more positive outlook. Exercising 30 minutes a day will decrease your appetite. Consistent aerobic exercise will produce positive attitudes because it triggers endorphin secretions in your central nervous system. Aerobic exercise is any exercise performed for at least 20 minutes at a steady, non-stop pace. Dr. Sneed says, to exercise your heart and lungs, most experts agree that you should exercise 4 times weekly. To use exercise as a tool for weight loss and maintenance, you'll need to work out 30 minutes every day. The more you exercise, the faster you will lose weight. To do this, find something you can grow to love that will fit into your schedule and your financial budget. Also remember that everyone, before starting an exercise program, must see his or her physician. The only way to determine whether you're working hard enough is to monitor your heart rate 2 or 3 times during your workout. It takes 30 to 40 minutes of sustained aerobic exercise for fat breakdown to equal the energy expenditure of your muscles. Another thing to consider is your overall activity level. Activity is not limited to formal exercise, but includes everything we do throughout the day. Specific exercises will tone the muscles underneath the fat and are important for athletes in training programs. They have very little to do with actual weight loss, however. Path 3. Saying goodbye. You must say goodbye to food dependency, goodbye to situation dependency, and goodbye to people dependency. And you must be aware of the dual nature of the goodbyes you will be saying. You need to be aware that, as strange as it may sound at first, pain itself can be addictive, and we must be willing to say goodbye to a chronically emotionally painful lifestyle. First, say goodbye to food dependency. Food can play many roles in the life of a compulsive eater. Identify what food has been to you. As you realize a codependent relationship, say goodbye to it. For example, if food has been a substitute for a human relationship, say goodbye to that role for food. You will also have to say goodbye to specific foods and eating patterns. One way to say this goodbye to old food patterns while maintaining flexibility is to use an exchange diet. An exchange diet is one in which all of the foods on each list, breads or vegetables or meats, are interchangeable. You can use any one of them to satisfy your calorie intake in that area. This exchange diet is explained in detail in the book Love Hunger. The following is a brief 4-part summary of how the exchange diet works. 1. Study food lists by category carefully. The starch and bread list, all of the meats, including fish, poultry, eggs, and cheese, the milk and milk products, the fruit and juices exchanges, and the very low-calorie vegetables and free foods exchanges. Also note the condiments, spices, and beverages. And finally, list the fats and the goodies exchanges, which may be used up to 4 times a week in place of one bread exchange. And finally, list the combination and fast food exchanges. 2. You must also choose your calorie level. To lose weight, most women will need to stay on 1,000 calories a day. Most men and very active women can lose weight on 1,200 calories a day. 3. Design your menus. Use a good daily menu planner and follow it carefully and regularly. When designing your menus, be sure to distribute the calories throughout the entire day. 4. Keep accurate records. An exchange diet program absolutely will not work unless you write down everything you eat and then check with your exchange diet list to make sure the number of servings in each category is correct and that you're not exceeding the limits for that day. It may take time to get accustomed to this diet, but give it some time. Try it. You may like it. 5. Along with saying goodbye to food dependency, it is necessary to say goodbye to situation dependency. If there are other dependencies in your life, any unhealthy obsession or fixation, this is the time to say goodbye to those behaviors as well. And perhaps most importantly, you may need to say goodbye to certain relationship dependencies. A codependent relationship is one in which people are overly dependent on one another and often swing between extremes of both dependence and independence. These are some major aspects of the codependent personality. Codependents are addicted to people and things. Codependents suffer from love hunger. Codependents believe something outside will make them feel okay inside. The opposite of codependence is not independence, but healthy interdependence. Balanced, interdependent persons can be both dependent enough to allow trusting vulnerability and genuine intimacy in a relationship, and yet at the same time be independent enough that they have their own emotional identity. Achieving interdependence in marriage can rise from taking a survey of your marriage. Ask such questions as, how do you and your spouse share control, time, money, spirituality, and sexuality? Look back through your answers and look for distortions. Achieving interdependence in parent-child relationships requires that the adult child complete the necessary steps of leaving home, residentially, emotionally, and spiritually. Finally, achieving interdependence in work relationships requires dealing with that person, your boss, manager, or supervisor, in the immediate situation, not projecting the shadow of one's parents onto this authority figure. Path 4. Grieving out the pain. Doing a good job of saying your goodbyes will bring you to a spontaneous experience of deep grief about the emotional wounds and losses of the past. Dr. Myers says the pain from love hunger creates an emotional pus wound that must be lanced with the needle of grief. If your pain is deep and the pressure is intense, however, your grief may come out in intense explosions. If this occurs, don't be frightened. Know that appropriate anger is a necessary component of grief. It is good. You may need help to get through this most difficult of stages. Find a supportive fellowship group, such as Overeaters Anonymous. Most of our patients will typically go through all the classic stages of grief. The first stage is shock and denial. One enters this stage of grief immediately upon the occurrence of a trauma. The shock and denial period should be relatively brief, allowing the person to progress through the more difficult stages to healing. The majority of food-addicted people we see, however, have been frozen in shock and denial for years, maybe even decades. This has happened for two reasons. Emotionally, they have simply denied their feelings and refused to go on with the normal process. Physically, they have tranquilized their feelings with food, just as a drug-dependent person would have done. If you have been frozen in shock for many years, it may take some time to thaw out your emotions. Continue looking back through your relationship surveys, saying your goodbyes, and keeping track of your feelings in your journal. Give yourself time to discover and experience what you haven't been feeling. To get out of the shock and denial stage, we ask our patients to make a list of the losses the addiction has cost them, as well as the losses of a childhood lost to a dysfunctional family of origin. The second stage of grief is anger. When the shock and denial thaw and the lancing needle pierces the pocket of pain, anger will erupt. Nearly every compulsive overeater is angry, either at self or at others. There are three forms of anger. Anger directed outward we call conventional anger. Anger directed inward we call depression. Then there is projected anger, where we imagine others are angry at us based on our own denied anger. There is also legitimate anger, a normal, healthy reaction to circumstances and relationships. The healthiest way to express anger is verbal. The more clearly you can state your feelings and the reasons for them, the better. There is more freedom to express strong emotions in a role-playing situation than if the person were actually there. If your angers are old and the person is deceased or has moved away, role-playing techniques can be very effective, or some people prefer to write a letter, which is often not mailed. For angers directed inward, try talking to yourself in the mirror, talking to yourself as if you were sitting in another chair, or expressing your feelings in your journal. The third stage of the grief process is bargaining. After the emotionally consuming stage of anger, one often experiences a letdown or a sense of being drained. In this period of calm after the storm, it is normal for people to try to bargain their way out of the situation, which we call magical thinking. Magical thinking can be dangerous because it may seemingly offer an easy solution to a complex issue. For example, the anorexic believes that weight loss will magically increase his or her lovability. The workaholic magically believes that achievement will erase guilt feelings. Give up the idea that God is Aladdin's lamp. We cannot earn our way into grace, either physically or spiritually. Your self-worth must not be founded on anything conditional. Your worth as a human being must be founded on the fact that you are a child of God. With this solid self-concept, one can find the courage to move ahead into real grief. The fourth stage is true grief, sadness. You need to grieve two paths of pain. First, there is the original pain of lost childhood that starts on the addiction cycle as a child. Weeping is the most honest expression of true grief. Tears bring cleansing, as if they were physically washing the emotional wounds. Secondly, one must feel grief over the addiction itself and over the losses that were byproducts of that addiction. Relationship pains, negative experiences, career losses. When the full impact of the loss strikes, there is often a flood of tears. It is equally normal to find that your grief comes in small pockets. It is important to understand that one may have to recycle through the stages several times. Often, patients will conclude a period of grief and feel they are ready for acceptance when a new wave of anger hits them. Be aware that it is possible to get stuck in one of the stages, such as anger or depression.
This concludes this side. Please fast forward the cassette to the end and proceed to the next tape for the continuation of the program.